My name is John Leyzorek. I'm co-founder of a plan and organization called Tactical Civics. If you're not already familiar with us, I urge you to look us up. I like old machinery. It tends to be simple and rugged. Because it's considered obsolete, it tends to be available, cheap, and with a little tinkering, it will often get the job done very well. I was unloading a truck and pulling saplings out of the ground with my 89-year-old tractor just yesterday. I think this interest is practical, but many more pursue it as a hobby. There are numerous websites devoted to this interest, innumerable threads about, look what I found in the woods, and here it start for the first time in 20 or 50 or 80 years, cranking away. Of course, people do keep refining old principles and inventing new machines to speed up or lighten any task you might think of. The new stuff is lighter, faster, cheaper than what the old stuff originally cost in those mythical constant dollars. Maybe it's easier to use if you can figure out those Chinese instructions. It also tends not to last very long, but that's okay because a newer, even better one is coming soon. Some have a lot of fancy lights and noises that may not contribute much to the function, but they look cool. Some have lots of safety features to keep you from doing things with them that someone thinks you oughtn't, or from sticking your fingers in the wrong place. I mildly crunched a car once that I was rolling because it would not start because the steering wheel was locked, a feature that somebody thought was a good idea. Often, the new equipment reports to some central data hub all about you and what you're doing. What could go wrong with that? I confess I'm an engineer. I absolutely love God and nature more than machinery, but playing with machinery lets anyone feel a tiny bit God-like, in the sense that we can pretty well understand its processes and start and stop it at our will, get great piles of stuff done with it, and often improve it as we learn. Of course, the actual inner complexity of every piece, every bolt and every atom of metal is infinitely greater as God created it than we will ever understand, but it apparently pleases him to let us ignore most of that and make things work anyway. It's possible to look at human societies as machines, too, with components and functions. And we know a good deal about the atoms of societies, that is, the individual fallen human beings like us. All societies have parts that make things, raise food, build houses, defend against dangers to the parts and dangers to the society as a whole, craftsmen, farmers, builders, soldiers. Often many individuals contribute to more than one function. Most societies have parts that tell other parts what to do and what not to do, although you would think that the farmer makes it his business to know how to farm and the other trades likewise. And right and wrong everyone knows, however hard we will occasionally try to push the boundaries just a little. The tell you what to do parts of a society are very good at convincing everyone else that they are the most important part, although they actually contribute next to nothing of value, and they are also very good at making sure that they collect for themselves an abundance of the useful stuff they want from the people who actually produce it. As societies get bigger and more complicated, the tell you what to do parts get better and better at playing a sleight of hand, taking stuff away from some people and handing a little bit of it back to others, and threatening until they have bought loyalty and subservience from most of the people. Of course, the lazy and dishonest people in any society tend to drift into the tell you what to do parts because there is no real work to do there and lots of free stuff, and maybe most important, the respect of many people who have swallowed their fairy tale about the relative importance of the different components of society. Often the tell you parts will convince the rest that they are threatened beyond their ability to just work together to defend themselves, and they need to form an army, a special component, specialized and dedicated to nothing but killing people and breaking things. Since the army is directly under control of the tell-yous, everybody else decides they had better not ask any questions. And now the tell-yous have a tool they can use to steal stuff from you and me, as well as from other societies, of course, almost always after explaining why they had no choice. Of course, I'm using funny terms and the machine metaphor to make you think in a new way about things you think you knew well. namely societies and their governments. These things are almost as old as people, and we are not the first to perceive their substantial benefits and their equally substantial drawbacks. Scripture tells us all we really need to know, not only about our own characters, but about organized societies and rulers. You might say that the yeast of Scripture working in the harshly kneaded dough of England as she was trying to sort herself out after the fall of the Roman Empire produced the first actual codified law limiting the powers of rulers and detailing how those limitations were to be enforced. After Arthur's star flared and died, it was another few hundred years around the end of the first millennium after Christ until the dooms of Ethelred, that we often refer to, were enacted. 700 years later, our forefathers, on this continent, an ocean away from the intricate forms and bureaucracies of England and Europe, mostly bereft of the Telus, who had stayed behind in the old world where life was less risky, and self-selected, they were self-selected for a level of courage and self-reliance scarcely imaginable to us. They had been discovering just how well they could do, taking care of their own, and doing what made sense to themselves, without being either told or heavily mulcted for the privilege. As the Telus over there extended a heavier and more threatening, grasping hand to us here in the New World, eventually we decided to refuse its oh-so-traditional demands and make our hard-earned independence a legal fact. And a few inspired geniuses saw and took the opportunity to apply all the wisdom of their heritage to designing, not just allowing to happen, the machine of their new society, our society. The result, as we all know, was our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, which made law out of the facts that God made each of us an individual, and our associations and forms are merely ourselves serving and protecting each other under His law, and essentially that there are to be no Telus. Particularly the lawful application of force, that tragic final sanction against evil, was never to be separated from us, but was to be wielded directly by us for our defense and for the execution of the law that protects us. That is the militia we all know. Fast forward to bumpy but mostly prospering centuries. As it happened, the combination of our low population density, abundant land and other resources, and our predominant Christian values appeared to require little enforcement of that highest law, and the prosperity that those coincident blessings brought forth began to seriously soften our once legendary rugged individualism. Growing population offered more than the opportunity to wrest wealth from nature by intelligence and toil, but opportunity also to harvest it from other people, maybe by fraud, lies, and corruption. The insatiably mercantile North saw in the South's lingering vice of human chattel slavery a pretext for a war that would overthrow the South's agrarian local self-reliance, and at the same time reapply to the whole republic the yoke of central control that we had thrown off less than a century before. The trumpeted triumph against slavery was a silent triumph of a subtler kind of domination. The victory of central control was so destructive, and the propaganda so compelling, that the whole country was shocked and awed into believing that the absolute power of central government was as necessary and inevitable as it was invincible. Any lingering fond memory of our law's specification for individual political self-determination, let alone conscience-based community enforcement of the fundamental principles of freedom, was burned out of our collective consciousness. And we were lulled by the panoply of growing empire, by a cascade of consumer goods, and by one crusade after another, in the name not of law or justice, but of democracy, the rule of the mob. The softer, the richer, and the more European we have become, the more the European diseases of bureaucracy, official parasitism, worship of human celebrities and institutions, and insistence on safety and predictability at all costs have invaded our culture and body politic, not to mention a vile palette of more personal perversions. Now the parasites are impatient to complete their reconversion of our once hard-headedly moral and independent society back into their slaves and sycophants. To secure their conquest, they must eradicate a few dangerous vestiges of our former power as sovereigns over ourselves and our society, like the rights to arms, to movement, to collaboration, to work, and to worship. A very few of us have been given the vision to perceive the stealthy process in its youth. We have warned, we have resisted, we have been mocked and marginalized. Suddenly now many see it, many are afraid, many are clamoring, we must do something. A tiny group of men was blessed by God a dozen years ago with the vision and the perseverance to begin laboriously rediscovering, under layers of lies and forgetfulness, that social machine our founders built, but which has never yet actually been run to secure the freedoms God gave us. It is all there. All the parts fit. It looks like it will run. But can we get it started? Tactical Civics is the name we have given to our program for learning how to start and operate the magnificent machine of our republic as it was intended to be operated in the language of our Declaration of Independence to secure these rights. It's a pretty simple, not to say easy, program. It includes demanding that 27 states complete the ratification of the first of the originally proposed amendments to our Constitution, the first article of the intended Bill of Rights. This will reduce the size of congressional districts to 50,000 or fewer people instead of 700,000 or more as they are now. This will give actual representation for the first time to most of the area of our republic instead of just the big cities. This will also exceed the capacity of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., which necessitates our second reform, the Bring Congress Home Act. This will require that Congress meet by telepresence, the way I'm talking to you. Every congressman working from a single small office in his home district, under the watchful eyes of the people he is hired to represent, out of the easy reach of the lobbyists. It will give us a whole new type of representative, the opportunity to run an inexpensive local campaign with no need for dirty money, and to serve from home without abandoning family and business will attract down-home statesmen rather than arrogant, greedy, megalomaniac careerists. Of course, down-home representatives, to say nothing of senators and state legislators and other government employees, will still be as fallen as we are, as prone to succumb to the temptations of power. So the only truly novel part of Tactical Civics' plan we call the indictment engine. This will determine the constitutionality of every proposed piece of legislation and allow every representative introducing it or sponsoring an unconstitutional bill to withdraw it or face prosecution. Now we come to the oldest parts of our marvelous rediscovered machine, already centuries old in our English common law heritage when they were written into our Constitution. Who will indict powerful members of government itself when they break the law they are sworn to uphold? Everyone knows how the system protects itself, and the law be damned. The grand jury, that is who. An institution first described in the year 997, and wholly independent of judges and prosecutors, with lawful power to investigate any suspicion of crime in its jurisdiction, and to examine any records and summon anyone for questioning. And who will carry the lawful demand for records to the offices of powerful officials, bring them in for questioning, even arrest them if necessary? Surely few ordinary sheriffs or police agencies, needing money for re-election or paid by the very crooked officials the grand jury indicts. Our Constitution contains only one mention of law enforcement, specifying that it is militia, that is to, quote, execute the laws, unquote. And who is the militia? In the words of signer George Mason, the whole people, all of us, we ourselves, for the protection of whose natural rights our whole edifice of government is built. It's ours. The founders knew only we, the people, ourselves, can be trusted without delegation to keep it straight. I said simple, but not easy. What should that look like on the ground? Our Constitution says that Congress is to, quote, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. But neither the states nor Congress have fulfilled this duty for 150 years or more. Does that mean that our constitutional militia, not only in the words of the Second Amendment, necessary for the security of a free state, but our only ultimately non-political and non-corruptible law enforcement, does that mean it's gone forever? It does not. Because our Declaration of Independence, in its catalogue of the crimes of King George III, sets forth the principle that the power to perform a duty delegated to government by the people, if government neglects that duty, returns to the people at large for its exercise. So, as many of you following this essay know, Tactical Civics has prepared a Constitution Enforcement and Militia Ordinance that any county or independent city or town governing body can pass, which will bring back into solid legal existence and practical operation the Constitution's specified necessary machine for enforcement of our highest human law. If you want to know more about this, please contact me or go to our website, but the details of the ordinance are not the subject of this talk. Any community can take up its duty of actually securing the rights of its citizens and making local self-determination, personal freedom, and common sense enforceable in that community. We do not have to wait for the governor or for the president. We are not the subjects of a king. We are not Chinese or Europeans. It is not their job. It is ours. So the question I actually want to explore here is why this plan, so simple but not easy, so clearly lawful and so comprehensive, is not being widely, eagerly, and quickly adopted all over our republic. Why so much grousing and hand-wringing and so little action? Why won't the old engine start? Several reasons occur to me, but remember, we are not here to make excuses for why we can't, because this is an essential, a necessary duty, more visibly necessary every day. So we discuss the obstacles only so as to get past them. I think the first obstacle is mere unfamiliarity. Our civilization has evolved or devolved to leave less and less of our own lives in our own hands. We call a plumber to fix our pipes, a teacher to teach our kids, except homeschoolers. God bless you, homeschoolers. A lawyer to navigate the law, a doctor if we cough, a landscaper if we want flowers, a policeman if we hear a thump in the night. So, too, enforcing the law seems like not our job. But what is law, anyway, but a built-up system for applying the rules of right and wrong that everybody knows to the conflicts of daily life and to the control of our impulses? Do we know right from wrong? Of course we do. In our own experience, do bureaucratic institutions reliably apply this knowledge? Hell no. So we return to the founder's wisdom. Enforcement of our law must be ours. We have to grow up and get used to that. But what about the cops, the prosecutor, the sheriff, all those people in the courthouse, looking down their noses over their glasses or through those scary mirrored shades at us? They think the law is their very own big stick, their playground, their candy store. A few of these are indeed hopeless, arrogant thugs, but most are not, even if they have been soaking in some serious, unhistorical bad attitude and have unconsciously absorbed a lot of it. They are all sworn to uphold the same law that we are talking about here, that we love, that makes America the unique place she is, that we are ready to fight for. They all want safer, more prosperous communities, as we do. We pay them. In many cases, we elect them. We are their neighbors. Deep breath here. We outnumber them. Our first resort must be to educate them, as sweetly and gently as possible, but as roughly as necessary, that we are in this together, that our goals are the same, that we, as militia, offer them more in enhanced capability and support and backup than they have dreamed of, as long as we all remember that we are on the same side and our highest law comes first, that the job and purpose of that law is to secure our rights, that we will stand for nothing less. Our countryside and even many of our cities are full of militia groups dedicated to the Constitution and to their communities. All of them know that they are our last defense against invasions, and they spend huge amounts of their own time and energy and money on training and supplies for armed confrontation with any enemy, foreign or domestic. Most are also right there, helping everyone after a disaster, looking after the vulnerable every day. You are, the guys and gals whom our founders called not only to repel the Indians and the Redcoats, but to enforce the Constitution, which means keeping our servants in government on the straight and narrow path of securing our rights, not infringing them. Oh, but the courthouse is unfamiliar territory, scary territory. Most of us have been there at one time or another, maybe paying crazy fees or trying to find records, or all alone or with a very expensive but not very helpful lawyer, to answer either for some dumb thing we know we should not have done, or to seek justice for something done to us, or for some perfectly righteous and reasonable thing we did that the bureaucrats did not like, and we felt lucky as hell to get back out and dirty all over from the experience. That is not how it should be, not how it must be. But that kind of experience creates a huge psychological barrier, a great aversion to even going in there, even when we know that we own the place. We need to get over it. We built and pay for that place, and we pay all the folks in there, and they work for us under our law. And we need to re-educate ourselves and them, as sweetly and gently as possible, but as roughly as necessary. Not alone, but in numbers, but not as a begging, pleading, or threatening mob, but as we the people who, to secure these rights, established this government. Part of the process of establishing our militia again in their law enforcement function is to get the recognition, the, quote, organizing, arming, and disciplining, unquote, that Congress has refused from our local governing body in the form of our binding ordinance. And all of us know politicians. Our local guys are hopefully not nearly as bad, as arrogant, as two-faced, as ambitious, as dyed-in-the-wool liars as their congeners in Washington, but many are trying to be, and it is too much to hope for that more than a few will help us merely because they love America as we do. If they refuse our lawful demand, we are not stopped, but we must seek their recognition. Again, we are their neighbors. We can look them in the eye, even if they will not look back. We can talk to them in their own language if they pretend not to understand ours. Their passing our ordinance will not only put them in the history books alongside Button Gwinnett, if not George Washington, but everybody in town will thank them on Election Day for the return of their jobs, their freedom, for safer communities, for a new way of enjoying community, and for a new sense of control over their own destinies. If your group has the kind of community support I think it does, that it has worked hard to earn, they will listen. They will know that they are getting paid to listen, and not listening will mean soon not getting paid anymore. We live in scary times. Tall buildings fall down that should not. People commit suicide who had no reason to. People are falling dead in heaps all over the world, or maybe they're not. But it is not yet nearly as scary as it was the last time we had to stand up in numbers against tyranny. Then you could be hauled out of your house and hanged on the same day. Our country could get there again. Some say it is headed that way fast, but we still have some time. It has to start in our local communities, as it did 200 years ago, because too much power has done its inevitable job of corrupting everywhere we have allowed it to. But it is not too late. The task is unfamiliar. That is why we discuss it, to make it familiar. It is scary, but fear is the source of carefulness and the mother of courage. That odd, small, but growing group, Tactical Civics, by divine providence, has found the keys, the plan, that can bring the light, the freedom, the prosperity, the self-respect, the American beacon of freedom roaring back. But it has to start in your community. Grab that rusty crank and turn, damn it, all together. Turn it. It will start. The machine will start. The team at Tactical Civics will answer any question. We'll stand by your every step. Our hands are on that crank too, but damn it, it is your community. Turn!